listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. This is episode 117, where we talk with Gavin, the Academy Director at the shop. We talk about how training helps new shooters, as well as how you can find out about your own shooting skill level, how to train at home, and how to find out what your next step is in your firearms journey. Thanks for listening, and as always, we hope you enjoy episode 117 of Range Minded, the Gavin Owens interview. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and I am joined as always by...
Steve Zimmerman in the Eastern Front.
Yeah, how's it going over there?
It's kind of warm today. It was a nice day today. We kind of hung out with some family, and then it looked like it was going to get nasty, so we came home. But it's kind of nice right now. Maybe you can hear the fans in the background. I don't have AC, so
right.
We have to use stupid, cheap little Walmart fans, and that's what we do.
It does the trick. So I mean, I have a fan going on, and I'm in the AC, so I feel you.
Yeah, it's a little warmer over that side of the state than this side. So
yeah, very much so. But we are not alone either, Steve. Introduce our guest.
No. Hey, we have Gavin Owens on with us today. And Gavin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so Gavin Owens, I kind of run the Academy stuff here at Independence. As far as background, it's relevant to this. Nothing super crazy or special. Took some classes, shot a little bit, and teach some people how to be safe with firearms and hopefully kind of get first steps on them as they're starting their firearms journey.
And there is a lot of new. Have you noticed any surges or anything happening at the store as far as class attendance, or are you still trying to get past that silly COVID stuff that's going on? Are you seeing any change?
Yeah, we've got a lot more new shooters in. First-time shooters, first-time gun owners, a lot of folks who previously may have been more opposed to the idea of firearms, but with current events, both COVID and riots and some civil unrest, are looking a lot more at how they're going to take care of their family and themselves. And it's cool to see, but it's also kind of an interesting experience for instructing, because you get people coming in who are terrified of firearms and kind of treat them like this magic talisman. But a lot of folks come in who bought guns but no ammunition.
Oh, geez.
Because they just want the gun, right? They don't care whether or not it shoots. They just want a gun in the house.
Really?
Which is fun. That's kind of scary, at least for an instructor standpoint, right? Why we try to make sure people understand what's going on and how to keep them safe. But a lot of these new gun owners, they're stuck in the Hollywood mindset where, I just need a gun. That'll solve all my problems.
That's so crazy.
That's spooky. It's kind of spooky.
Yeah.
But
it's definitely an odd one.
But it's also, for me, like, I look at it as just a blank canvas, right? Like, this is awesome.
I will 100% take those students over folks who, and I quote, grew up around guns, or their uncle's best friend's brother-in-law who was a Navy SEAL taught them.
Heard that one a few times.
Yeah, you kind of start running when you hear that.
Yeah, because really, like Steve said, it's a blank canvas, so you don't have to deal with any kind of bad habits. You can really dispel any myths, right there, right then and there in the beginning. And I imagine you have, even if they don't necessarily want any ammunition at first, they are probably willing to learn, right?
Yeah, down the line, once you kind of explain that, hey, in Hollywood, what do guns do? They blow people off the balcony and make them fly across the room to steal a line from Givens, actually. But the reality is, we're mainly shooting handguns. We can hold them with our hands. And this cool thing about, Newton's laws of physics, when we're shooting, if I can hold it in my hands, guess what? It's not going to throw anyone across a room, right? So we just dispel that myth, and they go, oh, maybe I'll give this a try. One of my favorite shooters we had recently came through class, was terrified the whole time. Grew up in Southern California in a family that was very anti-gun. She was self-admitted anti-gun herself. And at the end of class, she walked up and asked if it was okay if she had fun. Because guns have just been so stigmatized in her mind that it felt wrong to have enjoyed the act of shooting, which was kind of an odd one, but it was also really cool to hear.
Yeah, that's at least a nice thing to hear where, you've kind of changed somebody's mind there,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Those are awesome experiences too. Like, I think it's sometimes, being on the range, working on the range with folks, you get those shooters, new shooters that don't know it's okay to have a good time, or they expect something completely different than what it really is. And that first maybe magazine through the handgun compared to their last 20, 30 shots, they're completely different people, and they're having so much fun. And then it's like, oh, I see why you guys like this so much. This makes sense now.
Yeah, there's a there. Weird.
Yeah, I remember when, RSOing and stuff a lot, you get to see people, how quickly people become confident and actually enjoy what they're doing within, an hour or even 2 hours or something like that. Seems like there's so much anticipation at the very start. But all you need is like 30 minutes with an instructor and some supervision, and usually people get it,
Yeah, it always amazes me how quickly people gain confidence with firearms, which is, I think, kind of a double-edged sword a lot. The problem with it is that people think, they've taken one class and they're good, which is one issue. But the other one I see is people think that shooting means that they know how to be safe with a firearm. Right. And anyone who's spent any time around any other shooters knows that that's not necessarily the case, and that really getting those firearm safety rules, those kind of life rules in early is really vital, because so often the reality is that, their uncle explaining them, in the backyard may not suffice for actually getting across the consequences of mishandling firearms.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We talk about complacency a lot, and we've seen some pretty dialed in shooters, I say in air quotes, that think they know a lot at just violating simple things. And I've even seen new shooters correct them, or why is he doing that? Or, you know what I mean? It's pretty crazy.
I always tell the new shooters that they're actually the ones I'm least afraid of, because they're, there's the carelessness and ignorance, but the ignorant shooters normally know that they don't know a lot of times, when they're in class at least, and are afraid of it, right? They're nervous, so they treat it differently. It's the folks who get careless and know what they're doing, quote unquote, that we see, flagging other shooters or doing things that are just blatantly unsafe. And you're like, hey man, what's the deal with that? I'm like, well, nothing bad's happened before. I was like, oh yeah, that's why we wear our seatbelts too, right? I'm going to put it on right before something bad happens. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. But we teach at Independence more than just shooting classes too, or more than just handgun classes, right? Yeah,
we've got a pretty wide variety of them right now. I think largely due to everything going on, handguns definitely leading the way.
Sure.
Basic pistol and concealed carry particularly. But we also have a good selection of medical classes. If you want to learn how to shoot your long gun, carbine or shotgun, we can help you out with that. And then we've got some kind of self-defense and awareness classes, as well as some hunting-related ones that we do offer. Although right now it's really hard to convince people to take anything but a basic handgun class, and maybe, if we're lucky, a concealed carry. I think imparting the importance of medical and the legal side of things can be somewhat difficult, but equally important.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually been meaning to want to take a medical class and do an episode on it, just because we've said it before a couple times, where if you're in the business of making holes, then you should be in the business of learning how to plug holes as well. So
absolutely, and the reality is that a lot of us carry guns for self-defense. We don't really have to pull out our guns all that, but the number of times that you're driving along and there's a car accident, or someone's cooking in the kitchen and cut themselves with a knife, those events you want to be equally prepared for, if not more so, because if we're going to play the statistics game, it's more likely that's going to happen, right? And being prepared for that is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I mean, especially in here in Idaho, you're outdoors, you're camping, you're backpacking, hiking, any of that kind of stuff. That more stuff can happen, or stuff is more likely to happen than having to pull out your gun, or you getting shot or anything like that. So always
and
something good to listen to.
In a gun store, it's really easy to sell to folks the the making holes, plugging holes bit. But once they get in there, we ask, how many of you guys have been in a vehicle accident? And just about everyone raises their hand.
Sure.
It's like, how many of you guys knew what to do? And just about everyone puts down their hands, and one person always raises it, like, well, I called 911. 911's super helpful. That's a good start.
It's a great
The guy
start.
bleeding out in the front seat of his truck probably didn't appreciate that much as you did, but it's a good start.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But yeah, I've taken, a couple of handgun classes with some of the instructors that we have. And then I've taken the basic carbine class too. And really, I mean, any class you take, you're going to learn a lot, especially in person where somebody can help correct you, correct your form, help you diagnose problems. It's way better. And we've said it a bunch of times, but it's way better than any kind of YouTube video. You get way more out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the internet has done, I don't want to poo-poo too much because the reality is the internet's done a lot of good for progressing firearms training, but it's also done a lot of bad.
Sure.
There's a lot of those folks who watch one or two things on YouTube and are suddenly an expert. And then we also have those folks that watch those people on YouTube that's like, oh man, they've got a sub-second draw and they were shooting their handgun upside down at 200 yards. I could never do that. I don't want to start.
Right.
And that's kind of a bummer too, to be like, hey, those are outliers. And realistically, the knowledge you need to have isn't that, right? We can go into all the statistics of a defensive use of firearm, and it's not an upside down shot at 200 yards.
Yeah.
Squared away on some other things that are far more applicable.
And if you think that is a good use of a defensive handgun, then you probably need to take some more classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So how can you, when you do get somebody in your class or like in a class, and maybe let's say they're in an intermediate class or, they've shot a little bit or whatever, what kind of tricks do you use to find out where somebody is skill wise?
So I'm a really big proponent of metrics in training. I think far too often, both in practice and training, we say, wow, I did good. Good doesn't mean anything. Good is a feeling. Good isn't a result.
Right.
So I really like to start at the beginning of every class. After we're done with the academic portion, we go out in the range and we shoot standards, right? We've got 5 standards that we're going to shoot. We're going to record those results, both time and accuracy. And we're going to use those for a couple of things. One, at the end of the class, we're going to shoot the same standards. And if you didn't get better on any of them, it's probably a good sign that class was a waste. Yeah. So far, I haven't had anybody have that, but it's a good thing for those folks. The other thing is, as an instructor, it gives me more information, right? Because if we get 10 people in an intermediate class, those 10 folks need 10 different things or 20 different things or probably 1,000 different things. But the low-hanging fruit is different for each person. And while the curriculum is going to be similar, what we're focusing on each person is going to be a little bit different. Let's say, Jimbo at the end of the line, great draw, good reloads, all that stuff, but has a recoil anticipation flinch that throws bullets into the other state. Probably going to work a little more on that trigger control than, his best friend, Bob, who's never pulled a gun out of the holster with any kind of speed.
That makes perfect sense. Right. Because, one of the things that I've told a lot of people that they're very surprised about is that shooting is a lot like a sport. That there is, there's technique to it. There's, just like a golf grip or anything, there's a proper grip. There's proper trigger control. there's when something doesn't go the way you wanted it to go, there is a diagnosable way to fix that,
And the cool thing is it's actually a pretty short list. The act of shooting, the very simple, not easy, but simple act of shooting doesn't have a ton of components. I think in the class I was lucky enough to take this last week, we broke it down into 16 components, right? It was the most we could break it down into. Huh. They have subsets and stuff, but that's really not that many things to work on, right? So we can a lot of times figure and say, hey, this exact thing, we're going to pull that out, work on it, plug it back in there, and everything kind of increases. Whereas if we're talking to, hey, you're a defensive lineman in football, right? There's what's going on at the line. Okay, there's a fumble. What happens, right? Everything changes. So it's all this kind of stuff where there's a lot more focus. So I think explaining that sports terms is a good thing, and then saying, hey, the shooting part is actually the simplest part of the whole defensive equation a lot of times.
Sure.
It's the other part that's way more complicated.
Do you ever run into people who maybe have gotten in over their skis? Maybe they're taking like an advanced class when they've only taken like one basic class?
Yeah, so we do try and weed those out when possible. A lot of times we'll have folks come in if we haven't worked with them before and just shoot with one of the instructors, right? No charge or anything like that. Okay, come on in. It'll probably take between 10 and 50 rounds, and we'll let you know if you're ready to go or not. And a lot of those folks are good to go, but every once in a while we get that person in where it's like, hey, I can tell you've been shooting a long time, but there's some big mistakes or big kind of gaps in your training that we need to fill before you get to that level for a couple of reasons, right? Safety is a big one.
Yeah.
But to be fair to the other students, and if I spend my whole time working with that one problem child the whole time, those other 5-6 people on the line aren't getting the attention they deserve. So it's really not fair to them to have those people in class. And I think framing it in that way makes people understand a lot better. It's not, hey, you're not good. It's, I need to be fair to those other people. And at a certain time, you'll be at that level. Don't worry, we can get you there. Now's not the time.
Well, and one of the things that I noticed is that, going from beginning to intermediate, there is a little bit of a curve. Like you have to be proficient. You have to be comfortable, especially when you get into holster draws and all that kind of stuff. But from intermediate to an advanced class, that's really where I think the leap was. And I kind of, it's been a little while now, but I remember feeling like, okay, like I have to like bring my A game to this. This is a whole nother level,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think it's easy to impart on folks once they've gone through it. But a lot of times folks, the Dunning-Kruger effect is real. I'm better than everyone else and everyone else thinks so. So if we're all experts, nobody is. So when people come in, they go, I've shot my whole life. I'm good to go. Until you show them that, hey, this isn't the level of shooting we're looking for, they don't understand that. Right? They go, right. I've spent time around guns, therefore I'm good. And that's like saying, hey, I've spent time in a lot of cars. I could probably build one. That's a lie. Right? I'm not going to go bolting together a car anytime soon.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Is there a way that people who, maybe want to just see where their level, like their skill level is at on their own, like go to the range and stuff? Is there a way that people can do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to go about that. The first one I mentioned already is kind of that diagnostic class or time set where you go, hey, come on in. We'll figure out kind of where you stand. The other option is private lessons. That's probably a better use of people's time. They're just coming in because they're already at the range. They already have all their gear. We're going to find issues. We can work on them and also then say, hey, you're now going to be better set up for whatever course we recommend.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's one of the things that I think where, I think people do have a hard time of trying to figure out where their skill level is or maybe like you said, it might be a good reality check where it's like, oh, I got this to work on and, I'm not going to be able to keep up. So that, like you said earlier about, you don't get anything from that class. Well, then that class is going to be a waste of money.
Yeah. And a waste of time.
Yeah.
The single biggest commodity I see on the instructor side is we never have enough time with students.
Right.
No matter how long the class is, there's always a need for more time, whether it be a 4-hour class or a 5-day class. At the end, it's I had to cut something or not fully cover something that I may want to because we just don't have the time. So getting people in that private lesson where we say, hey, we're going to diagnose and fix it. You don't have to drive to the range a second time. Right? You don't have to get all your gear together a second time. You don't need to find a second and third order effects, a babysitter for the kids. You don't have to make your significant other mad when you decide to go out for an evening when they've got to go clean the house or something like that. We've got to look at those things as well. And understand that folks have lives outside of this and try and work around that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things is that, there's one of the most underrated things that you can invest, time or money into is a private lesson because that instructor is tailoring, that lesson in his or her time to your skill level, to address your problem specifically. And they're not dividing their time, between, maybe a dozen or more other students.
Yeah, exactly. I think a really good example of that. And I've mentioned the class that myself and Sarah, one of our other instructors, were lucky enough to attend this last week. But during it, it was all instructors in the class. It was an instructor development course. And every time you were shooting, the other relay, the other line, was coaching you one-on-one.
Oh, cool.
So it's all instructors instructing instructors. You'd be like, oh, man, everyone's good to go. But that's not the case, right? Everyone has little things.
Sure.
But more importantly, I think across the line, everyone walked away going, well, you can make an even bigger impact in one shooter's experience by just that one-on-one coaching than instructing a class you could ever
Absolutely.
feel. We can meet you where you're at.
Yeah, I think I've said before, is that, or maybe not if I'm going to say, I'll say it now, but, for a good general overview of like concepts that you need to know at a certain level. Like there's no beating like a class with other people. Especially with the academic side of things, being in the classroom, kind of getting the theory behind stuff. But for stuff that you need to hone in on and really to fine tune, it seems like that a class or a one-on-one lesson would can't really be beat, Yeah,
it's definitely that student to teacher ratio is real. That's why we try and keep even our classes at higher levels pretty small, because you have to take that time with each student. Basic pistol, we can teach everyone the concepts of grip and sight alignment and trigger press, as well as their shooting platform, all pretty readily. But then those little tweaks is where we have to deal with everyone one-on-one.
Right.
It's kind of a good indicator. The higher the class you get into, the fewer students there's going to be, not just because there's fewer people interested, but because that instructor is going to take a lot more time with you as an individual.
Yeah, the intensity of the training has to be more focused per student.
Yeah, and we start doing things that require more supervision. Standing on the line, picking your gun up off the bench and shooting is different than, hey, I'm going to turn on all the lights, you're going to use your flashlight over there, and you don't know how many targets are in there, right? That's a whole different ballgame on the safety side as well.
Yeah, that's a lot. Steve, do you have any questions yet so far?
So what, as we talk about the journey, because that's really what, the idea of this particular show is identifying the journey of a shooter, right? Where do we help them start? Maybe identify where they're going to be. What are some of the steps that you've seen lately that maybe some of the staff's been doing, or some of your instructor staff, I guess a better way to put it, to really help guide these new students where they need to be and hit their goals?
I think the biggest way is before every class, really acknowledging the fact that this class is kind of a unique opportunity in a lot of ways to get these points across to people who would normally not be in there, but also to acknowledge the fact that the people in there may be doing it really reticently. They're not really gung-ho. We need to meet those folks where they're at and start that journey successfully. Because if we have a goal for basic pistol, it's they leave being safe and having a desire to know more. And that drive to learn more. Because if they leave thinking they know everything, we failed them. If they leave saying that was a terrible experience and I never want to do it again, we failed them. And if they leave being unsafe, we failed them. That's probably the key one.
Right.
And it's not a marketing thing, right? I tell people in every class I teach, I don't care what instructor you go to next, as long as they're reputable, go get more training. Right? Just go seek out more training there. And that's the kind of that bug we need everyone to get bit by and understand that this is a really serious matter. They need to take it seriously and invest in that training if they want to be proficient.
Right. And I think that's something that, at least in my experience working at the stores, something that we've done well is we've been able to find the instructors that not only have a passion for the industry, but they have a passion for teaching. And then they have the ability to kind of kindle that little fire in those students to where, most of them, I'm not going to say all of them, most of them want to move on to the next step, which is key. I mean, that's the whole point of why we teach is to keep that Second Amendment going and to keep people safe and to bring more people into the fold, so to speak. And like I said, I think we've done pretty good with that with the instructors that we have. Yeah,
when it comes to hiring instructors and dealing with them, it's definitely, you're looking for folks who care above anything else. Right? You could have the best shooter in the world come in, and if they don't care about the students, they're a bad instructor probably.
Yep.
Meanwhile, if you have someone who is a middle-of-the-road shooter, good grasp on everything, but really, really cares, they're going to have a lot better results. Because people know that, right? As humans, we're pretty good at intuiting a lot of things. And if I'm like, hey, this guy doesn't care about me, I'm a number, we're not going to get through.
Yeah, one of my really good friends over here, an older gentleman, and he's exactly that way. He has a passion to teach. He has an amazing ability to teach any concept to any level of shooter and meet them wherever they're at. But he honestly really isn't that good of a shooter, like you're saying. But he has the ability to teach the principles and help them move on, which those are the best ones. Like you say, they're the best kind of instructors out there.
Yeah, and I think especially for that beginning level, right? If we get to more advanced classes, A huge component of adult learning is demonstration.
Right.
So if I say, I need you guys to do this, and they look at you and say, show me, and I go, I can't, that's not going to be successful.
That's not going to work.
That's true.
For the beginning classes, what we're teaching them is really straightforward. Just about anyone who has invested time can probably demo it. They've got that component down, but people really need to feel that this person teaching me cares about me as an individual. Because if we put ourselves in the student's shoes, they're there for all kinds of reasons, but for a lot of folks, it's for self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing that the instructors, and it's a really good job, is realizing that this could be the only instruction this person gets before they go out and have the worst day of their life. And that's something that I think gets skimmed over a lot, but it's a very serious business sometimes too. And being aware of that, meeting folks where they are, but also getting across that, hey, we're setting you up for success the best we can because we care about you, not just in class, but later on if you have to use this stuff.
Well, and you brought up a good point earlier, and about how you as an instructor were going to a class, and that just shows we've talked about it on the podcast before, but basically that your firearms journey and the way you develop your skills and learn, that's never done. You're never done training. You're never done learning, and it's nice to hear that there are instructors doing that. How do you kind of impart that idea onto people?
I think actually going back to demoing things is really helpful in that, because they get to see someone shoot at a level that they may not be used to. And a lot of people go, well, I see where I'm at and I see what just happened. And they have no idea about the journey to get there. Right.
Right.
They don't necessarily know that spend 15 minutes every day dry firing. That's not in their mind. They go, what magic button can I push to get as close there as possible?
Right.
And
how can I get there now?
It is going to be a lot of training. It's a lot of hard work, but finding an instructor you work well with, work with them to get your basics down, and then find as many people as possible to learn from. It's one thing that the internet's really good and bad at, that exposes us to all these really excellent sources of information, but it's hard to tell excellent from bad. But it does allow people to look around and say, hey, this is something I'm interested in. Here's people that teach it. I'm going to go there and look for that. And explaining to folks that that's how you get better, I think is really a useful tool to kind of throw in the instructor toolbox for that long-term student or the lifelong learner.
Yeah, because I imagine, like you said, there's probably a mix of people where it's like, I got my training and I'm done, and you may not be able to convince them otherwise. But then you really kind of probably have to pick out those lifelong learners and really nurture that.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's who you least expect, which is always cool. Yeah, we have one lady who's in classes right now. She's retired. She had never fired a handgun until the ripe old age of 82.
82.
She took a basic pistol class, and the next morning signed up for intermediate CCW and basic AR. Wants to take intermediate carbine and a medical class here as soon as she can. That's like, crazy. Okay, we might need to pump the brakes a little bit and talk to her about the act of practicing in between classes. But that's someone that she has the right spirit. She understands that this isn't something that you want to necessarily figure out the day of, especially for her. It's 100% defensive. She was explaining to us that what got her into this was having grandkids and seeing protests on TV. Those two things went together in her head, and she went full mama bear. And it's like, hey, I've got to be able to take care of myself and these people I care about.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What are some of that is awesome. I hope that I can be like an older person like that and continue to be training. That would be super cool. But
oh yeah, she burns it down too. She knows what's up.
What are, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but what are some of the comments that you're getting about, reasons people are coming in and starting their firearms journey?
I think the two biggest reasons we have right now really go hand in hand. The first one is I want to be prepared because I see that the world's changing. Whether or not that's true, it's true in people's minds. And they say, hey, I want to respond to this. That's really cool, seeing people be prepared. And the other side we see is we got this gun, whether last week, 10 years ago. So it's sitting around the house. We were always kind of afraid of it, and now we want to not be afraid of it anymore. And that's another kind of unique thing for us to deal with, because that's someone who may not be invested in using a firearm for defense, and kind of trying to convince them that that's a real possibility, and having that on hand just gives you one more option. Has really been kind of a cool, I don't want to say challenge, but a cool dynamic that we've had in classes recently.
Yeah, I mean, the way the world's changing, as you put it, I mean, is really kind of changing the name of the game with firearms. And I think it's really our opportunity to be, the people there that are friendly, that are, willing to take people as they are and just teach them how to be safe and give them the confidence, Yeah,
I feel really blessed to be able to kind of be on that side of it. Mainly because I get to deal with the folks who decided to get training, which is a huge blessing. I'm not just dealing with the general public. A lot of the times we don't get a lot of people in who are hugely anti-gun or anything like that. They're more nervous or scared. Sure. Every once in a while we'll get a significant other that's maybe a little bit less firearms inclined, but that's kind of the most we have to deal with, and definitely get to kind of see the best in people, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned a little bit a while ago how, training and practicing in between classes, is obviously important, especially because we've talked about it before on this podcast, but that training and your firearm skills are depreciable. They're going to go away with time if you don't keep up with them. What are some things that you recommend that people do maybe at home? Because maybe you can't go to the range every week, or, maybe you are, depending on where you are in the country, you have to stay at home or something like that. What are some things that people can do at home to practice and keep those skills up?
Really, the single best skill they can do is dry fire practice. Consistent dry fire is without a doubt the best way to both develop and keep skills consistent. While you don't necessarily get that feedback of the bullet leaving the barrel, you get to do just about everything else, and you have the opportunity to do it perfectly, which is kind of rare, because a lot of things that we do, there's other external factors that's going to throw us off our game. Right? When we're shooting, for example, we have the noise, we have the recoil, the concussion. If you ask even a pretty good shooter what just happened to their last trigger press, a lot of times they'll look at you and go, I think this happened. Meanwhile, in dry fire, they can say, hey, I had too much finger on the trigger, pushed my sights to the left as I pressed that trigger. So we can diagnose those things. And there's been a lot of research into people being effective in a skill set. And the single best indicator is how recently have they done that thing. Right? So if we're looking at this defensively, would it be better for me to get 2 or 3 short dry fire practice sessions a week, or 1 big range session a month? And the answer there is definitely a dry fire. I'm going to be far more proficient. I'm going to have just worked on, say, my draw, about to use my gun, rather than go, ooh, man, 28 days ago, I pulled the gun out of the holster a little bit and shot, and man, I hope this goes. If you talk to folks who do any amount of shooting and they step away from their guns for a while and come back, they're like, yeah, my handgun shooting has taken a nosedive. But if they stay consistent with dry fire, it's a really quick recovery, if any, for getting those skills back up. In fact, you can become a proficient shooter without really shooting a lot of bullets at all. South African Army did a study in, I want to say, the 90s. They had one group of recruits shoot their live fire training course, and the other group didn't fire a single round until qualification day, and the dry fire group actually did better on the qualifications.
Really?
I was going to say, there's a video of T-Rex arms, and say what you like. There's things they do that I like, and there's a lot of things they do that kind of bug me. But they had a Japanese airsoft guy come over and shoot a qual with them, and he smoked it. Like, he shot, because he's been shooting airsoft for so long. He understood the fundamentals, and he was just as fast as all the high speed, low drag guys that thought they were super cool.
That's crazy.
Same thing. It was just good habits, and basically dry fire is kind of the same thing as dry fire. He's just shooting little plastic BBs downrange.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's fast, and it's the exact same concepts. And you're right, dry fire's a huge component, and we've talked about it before, and it's important.
Yeah, I mean it's not the most sexy thing in the world, and you have to really set aside some time to focus and actually make it happen or whatever. But I've noticed that because I haven't been able to go to the range as much lately. But just dry firing, a couple times a week or whatever really does keep your trigger press and, your sight alignment, all that stuff and your grip. It really makes you a lot more aware of what you're doing. And I feel like the more that you can see what you're doing and diagnose yourself, the better that you're going to be able to get those skills back or even, help diagnose yourself and make yourself better,
Right.
Absolutely. And the competitive side of things often gets poo-pooed for being unrealistic and such. And I think some of that criticism is valid. Some of it may be a little bit of an excuse for people not wanting to go, have to show their own skill set. But if you do talk to those shooters, they are without a doubt the best shooters. And notice I said shooters, not tacticians or, cop or whatever in the world. And a lot of times they have a 5 or 10 to 1 dry fire press to live trigger press ratio.
Wow.
And these are guys that get free ammo and can shoot all day if they want to. And they spend significant more time in dry fire than they do live. I think that's a good indicator. There's something there. Let's take advantage of that knowledge they've built up.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my other questions. Sometimes, at least I remember when I started shooting, where you look at a class and you're like, wow, I need 500 rounds of ammo. That's a lot. And now obviously that's not hardly anything, depending on what you're doing. But does round count matter when it comes to getting proficient? Obviously we kind of answered that question already, but, can you talk about kind of why you set the round counts that you do for certain classes or for training?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our basic pistol classes, we try and keep it less than 100 rounds.
Oh, wow.
Because the goal there is to get people confident, right? We don't want them walking away saying, I'm exhausted and my hands hurt from doing something that's brand new.
Sure.
A lot of us that have shot a while, we all have Glock knuckle, right? All these new shooters come in with their Glock, and we don't remember as that gun rubbed on our knuckle a bunch, but they do. Also, it's a little bit later at night, people are getting tired, so we keep the round count a little bit lower to let them focus on good quality repetitions rather than just getting a high number of repetitions.
Sure.
Especially with everything going on right now, it's one thing's really cool. We can say, hey guys, in this class, is anyone opposed to us shooting 100 rounds? And if someone goes, yeah, I have 250 rounds of 9mm to my name, right? I only want to shoot 50 rounds of it. It's like, yeah, we can totally make that happen for you. And when everyone else is shooting live rounds, they're doing dry fire on that repetition.
Right.
For things like intermediate and advanced, the round count absolutely goes up, but that's because we cover more. Right? We get probably the same number of repetitions of each thing, but it's not just getting a good grip, a good sight picture, and firing 1 or 2 rounds. It's we're working reloads, working malfunction clearing, shooting from positions that are less than ideal in less than ideal circumstances. That kind of stuff takes repetitions, and we need some live rounds to get feedback on that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just because I think some people think that, I go and shoot 500 rounds every time I go to the range, I'm going to be awesome. That's not necessarily true. You could do something wrong 500 times.
Yeah, you could get really, really bad 500 times.
That's definitely not the goal. So, Steve, go ahead.
We see that, we see that all the time on the range when you're officiating the range. You see guys that are doing that, you see shooters that are doing that. They're just perpetuating those bad habits, and once it starts getting ingrained that much, it's really difficult to get them out of that habit.
Yeah, especially as folks, they get those repetitions, they feel comfortable with it, and I think one thing that we often fail to acknowledge on the instructor side is we're teaching adults, not kids. Kids are kind of programmed to go, hey, this person standing up front probably knows what they're talking about. I'm going to listen to them. Adults have that mature self-image, right? They go, I've survived this long, whether it be through luck or skill, and I can probably take care of myself. What does this guy flapping his gums up the front of the classroom have? How can he make me better when I think I'm good.
Right.
He's going to have to prove to me that they can actually do that. And those are kind of the challenging students sometimes. And sometimes
Sure.
you need to tell folks like, hey, just give it a try. My advice for folks on any class at any level, unless it's blatantly unsafe, try what the instructor is saying for the rest of that class. At the end, if you like it, keep it. If not, keep it in the toolbox, but don't practice it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a million ways to teach grip, and there's probably 2 or 3 that work best for you.
Well, that's like so we did an episode on taking classes twice. And sometimes depending if you have different instructors or maybe you just pick up different things because you know the structure of the class. I think taking a class twice is actually extraordinarily beneficial.
Yeah, taking a class twice, or even just if you can audit a class sometimes and come in and sit and just listen to that academic portion again. There's a lot of studies that say we get, on the generous side, 26% of what we get taught in the classroom. So that means 3/4 of the stuff that was said in class went over everyone's head or in one ear and out the other. So if I audit a class and get 10% more of the classroom portion, that's great. I don't even need to go to the range to pick up a lot of that good knowledge.
Yeah, because there's sometimes just a lot to think about.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing that it's really easy to fall into as folks like us, that we like to shoot, right? We do this for fun. It's our livelihood. It's our lives. And we kind of get that ivory tower effect where we go, shooting's cool. Everyone's going to like shooting. Everyone's going to want to practice this. And then we step into the learning side and the teaching side like that. When the reality is there's some folks that, this is something that they've wanted to do and they're going to invest 1 day a month doing it. For them, that's a huge time commitment. For the rest of us, we'd be like, that's unreasonable. But that's where those people are at, and we got to meet them there.
Right.
And I think by getting them in that first class, it's really good explaining that and explaining that there's other options down the line for getting that knowledge.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Steve, do you have any other questions?
Oh, you got me right in the middle of drinking a drink. That's one thing.
Oh, man, bad timing.
Sabotage.
I know it.
So we kind of covered it a little. I'll ask another question while you finish enjoying your beverage then. But what we've covered it a little bit, but what makes a good instructor to you, Gavin? What do you like, if you go to a class, what kind of advice can you give somebody to find a credible instructor?
So I think what makes a good instructor and finding a credible instructor, 2 different things.
Okay.
But they definitely go hand in hand. As far as being a good instructor, the biggest one is you have to actually care about your students. Right? You can't be there for the paycheck or to be able to put it on your social media that you're a firearms instructor. First off, nobody cares. And the second thing is that you're not helping anybody by putting that out there. You have to come into class and go, hey, these are all people. These people are looking at me for good information. And it's not the kind of information where if I teach them wrong, they're not going to be the best at kicking a soccer ball. It could be something that's life and death, whether or not it be an accident or a defensive use of a firearm. So looking through that lens is important. An instructor who is willing to take feedback. At the end of the class, if an instructor doesn't ask for feedback, I think it's a pretty big red flag, no matter how long they've been doing it. And then an instructor who's willing to continue learning. It's really easy to become relevant in the firearms industry. Things are not necessarily new things are coming up, but things are constantly changing, and there's better ways to teach things coming out. There's new knowledge and there's new approaches, and making sure to stay consistent with that is really important. And then that also gives you, this is probably the biggest one for me, the ability to have a why behind what you teach, not just say, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way I was taught it. You need to be able to break down in incredibly minute detail the rationale behind everything you're explaining to people, because that's what adults look for, right? We want to know why things happen, why things the way they are. And if we can present that to students, they're going to be a lot more successful.
Yeah,
as far as finding a good instructor, I think one thing is know what you're looking for, right? I'm not going to go take a class about how to shoot a handgun the best way in the world from someone who teaches night vision, right? That guy could be a good handgun shooter, but that's not what the class is for. I think a lot of times folks go, oh, there's this guy that was, in the military or in law enforcement. I'm going to go to them to learn to shoot really well. Shooting's a really small portion of their job in both of those professions. While it's really important, they have a million other things to be aware of and proficient with as well. So they may not be the best, handgun shooter in the world, for example. So be realistic with who you're going to. Be realistic what you want to get out of the class. There's not a single class that's going to make you the best shooter in the world. And look around for what other instructors are saying about them. The instructing world or the firearms world is incredibly cutthroat. So if one instructor is getting good praise from just about every other instructor, that's a clue that that person is doing something right. Because it's really easy to find faults with a lot of people, I think. That's what a lot of people tend to go through, especially on the firearms side. They don't like this person because they taught this one thing wrong this one way. Huh. But if you can look and go, hey, this person, even begrudgingly, is respected by all these other instructors, that's a good perspective.
That's awesome.
If you're just getting into a basic class, though, what's local to you is a great start. Right down the line, as long as they're somewhat reputable and are safe, stick with them for those first couple classes, and then start branching out. Start looking for places that can provide more than what you're looking for.
And that's the thing too, is you can go to your local gun store, and most of those salesmen are going to know, hey, this guy teaches an awesome class, or they're going to know who the good ones and the bad ones are, because they're going to get that feedback from the people that are coming in buying guns and have already taken those classes. So asking questions is the very first thing you're doing, right? Just ask around. There's a lot of good, like you're saying, good local instructors. Even if they don't want to come take a class from us, there's places to go. Obviously, we want them to come to our store, but we're not the only. We're just a little more cool.
Yeah, we've got a sweet indoor range, and we don't have to worry when it's 102, and we don't need to worry when it's 20 degrees out.
That's right.
Super nice.
Comfortable classroom, comfortable range. Yeah, that's a big plus. Kind of on that note, Steve, the biggest last probably 4 or 5 recommendations we've had were from Cabela's and Sportsman's, which is always kind of odd because they kind of get a bad rap a lot of times on the firearm sales side. They sell people whatever's new and cool, either if it fits their bill or not a lot of times. But there are folks there that are saying, hey, there's a place that is teaching this. Go check them out. So actually, I should probably go hunt those folks down and give them a Starbucks gift card or something as a thank you.
Yeah, right. Mainly
just for getting people training, right? We're filling classes. That's not the issue, but getting the word of mouth out, the training's important. It's really the big one.
And that's the purpose, right? That's why we set up the academy, is to teach people. And
it's not to go get super rich.
It's funny. I've never understood the anxiety between gun stores and everything. I've always thought that was just so ridiculous, because we all have the same goal in mind, whether it be responsibly selling firearms to people that need them, or to push people towards education. So I've never understood why all these gun stores are always so grumpy with each other. We're on the same team. My gosh.
Yeah, we have enough things to fight, not including ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Let's stop. And I think that's true across the whole firearms community. It's so easy for us to get splintered and argue about details that don't really matter, right? Explaining to someone about guns, yelling at them that AR doesn't mean assault rifle probably isn't the best way to make inroads.
Anger solves everything, right? Anger just solves it all.
Do it more, better.
No, those are some really good points about, finding a credible instructor, and just, that you're right. I mean, that you don't, one of the things that I like to do is just ask people's opinions. Okay. What do you think of this guy or this instructor or whatever? And the good and bad thing in the gun world is that there's no shortage of opinions. You're going to get what you ask for, So I think that's a really good way of using almost like an interesting quirk of the gun world to your advantage.
Yeah, and one good resource that I forgot to mention that's really good is most folks that take classes write an after-action report, an AAR. This is one thing the internet's great for. Look up those reports, right? Say, is this the stuff that was taught in this class? Is this what I'm looking for? It's going to tell you. It's not going to tell you all the tips and tricks that were taught, but it's going to tell you the general outline of the course. What equipment was needed. their thoughts at the end of it, and just kind of a general overview of what happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and take advantage of those, read those, and say, is this what I wanted or not? One thing to be aware of when you're asking around, I wish I could tell everybody this, is just be aware of that kind of virgin love of first instructors. If that person loved the one instructor they've ever taken a class from, that's awesome. But that's also a sample set of one. It's definitely a little bit biased.
It's a good tip. Yeah. Yeah. You brought up something else interesting too, about gear. I think you probably get kind of both ends of the spectrum where somebody just brings their gun and nothing else. And then some people are all kitted out, to take a basic pistol class. What do you kind of recommend, just to kind of have as basic gear, for people, if you're going to take a class?
For a basic class, bring what you have. Don't go out and buy a brand new gun for the class. Don't worry about getting a fancy holster or anything like that. Have good eye and ear protection, preferably electronic hearing protection. Just makes it a lot easier to hear things in the range so you're not missing out on things. Bring the gun you have, and we have options for you if that gun doesn't fit you well, right? We see people all the time show up with their grandpa's tiny little pocket J-Fam revolver that is honestly kind of terrible to shoot. And they don't end up taking the whole class with that. They end up, shooting a larger gun. It's a little bit easier to handle, or a gun that fits their hand a little bit better, lower recoiling. We can accommodate that, but it's really hard for us to talk you out of the purchase you just made, right? I ran to Cabela's and bought my Smith & Wesson Shield, and it recoils a lot in my hand, and now I'm regretting my purchase, but I got to fight through it the whole time, right? We want to nip that at the bud and say, hey, let's try all these guns, rather than just have you go buy one. For more advanced classes, holsters that don't collapse in on themselves is a big one. You need to safely reholster your gun, and bring more than 2 magazines if you're firing a semi-auto. For the love of God, please.
Yeah, I was going to say that usually, a good gun shop has rental guns that you can try out and, try different guns to find one that fits kind of, yours in a basic class or whatever. But I've seen, people running out from classes or whatever, like, hey, can I borrow a magazine from the rental counter or whatever? And it's like, well, somebody's already using that. You're out of luck, Yeah,
it's really hard to, on the kind of go back to the instruction side a little bit. We talked about time being the most valuable resource. So in between strings, we're not just sitting there twiddling our thumbs. We're reviewing what happened. We're talking about the why behind things, some variations. And if you're constantly running to the back to go jam mags more, you're losing time when you could be getting instruction, right? So you're really just cheating yourself a lot of times.
Yeah.
Kind of makes the instructor upset, not mad at you, but it's like, hey, you're missing out what you're here for. You're wasting your own money, man. If you would spend a little bit more.
And it's such a distraction for other students. Why does this guy he's slowing all of us down. It's distracting. It's frustrating.
Yeah, you don't want to be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
So my last question I have for you actually is, so we talked about what makes a good instructor, but what do you think makes a good student, and how can somebody prepare to get the most out of their class?
First thing, come in with an open mind. Especially on the adult learning side, people have to be open to learning before they're ever going to learn.
Right.
So come in, have an open mind. Just tell yourself, for the next 4 hours, I'm just going to listen. I'm not going to have to necessarily interject or justify anything on my previous experiences. I'm just going to try and learn what's being taught in this portion. Whether or not you want to keep them or not, that's up to you, but do that after the class. And show up like you're actually taking a class, right? If I told someone they're showing up to a college class to learn something, they'd probably bring a notepad and pen and paper and a cup of water. It's probably not a bad call there, showing up for any class.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Don't, try and cram it in between a bunch of things. So you're showing up all stressed after a long day. Be in the right mindset. And then the last thing is be open to having your mind changed. Not just open-minded, but things that you held near and dear to your heart maybe being changed at the end. And that's okay. We don't need to justify things we know necessarily. And I think people get really defensive. This is what I always thought. They may have even told other people things, so they're embarrassed by that changing. I'll call myself out in this instructor development class. There's two things, the way I presented them, they completely changed after this class, right? They are objectively better ways to teach these two processes.
Yeah.
And I'm totally going to use them. And I'll admit to previous students, hey man, if you take a class with me, that's changed. This is better. I'll even give you a 5-minute spiel now. Why? Because they deserve to have that.
Sure.
So
That's cool,
constantly
man.
betting yourself, and I think people are going to be set up for success.
Yeah,
Nice.
I think there are a lot of people just in general who are usually averse to saying that, okay, I did do it this way and owning up to it like you're saying you do. And then, but here's why it's better. And I'll show you right now, So that's cool to hear.
And I think that's going back to finding things in good instructors, getting people that enjoy that. Every good instructor I know enjoyed being told why they're wrong and why.
Sure. Makes perfect
by someone
sense.
who actually knew.
Love it.
And that's just if we're not teachable, then we won't be able to teach it. It just doesn't work.
It goes both
Wherever
ways.
Wherever I drew the line, where I stopped learning is where I can stop teaching.
Yeah. That's wise words. So that's the last question I have. Steve, do you have any questions?
Oh, I've got 5 questions.
Okay, let's see. We've been waiting in suspense the whole time. So,
So nothing to be too nervous about, Gavin. It's not a big deal. But anytime we have a new guest on, we've come up with some different questions just to kind of take everything out of the box and get to know our guest a little bit more. So I'm just going to jump right into them. Are you ready?
All right, hit me. Yeah.
Yeah, just answer them. Just be honest. Just answer.
there's no wrong
whatever you
answer.
feel. Okay. So,
Famous last words.
all right. So what experience in your life has been the most influential and why?
Most experience. Like single experience.
Yeah.
Sure.
Probably some wise words from my grandfather there, not to get too tacky on things. Kind of in regards to not just firearms, but life in general. And he was really, he found being a student to be really important. And he told me, if you're ever in a stressful situation in life, look around. If there's someone more qualified than you, do everything you can to help them. If there isn't anyone more qualified than you, take charge. And if you have no right to be in charge or in charge, that's probably a sign that you failed at everything. Not being in a position where you are in charge and failing is kind of a big one for me.
I love it. That's great. We've not heard that one before.
That's awesome. All right, number 2. You just won the lottery. It's an exorbitant amount of money. Just an unbelievable amount of money. What's the first thing you're going to do with that money and why?
I'm going to go buy like 50 acres in the middle of the woods.
Excellent.
And have a cool little place that's fun to hang out, teach people to shoot, do crazy outdoorsy stuff, and just kind of be able to step back away from it all sometimes. I think that'd be the first one for me. And it's been way too much money on like a bespoke 19 or 2011, but that's secondary.
Very
secondary,
cool.
Right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So number 3, what's your biggest fear?
Ooh, this is failing others, I think, is a big one. Being put in a position where you had the opportunity to help somebody else, but didn't or couldn't, I think is the biggest one.
Nice.
That's a good
Goes
one.
along with what your grandpa's counsel, huh?
Yeah, it probably has a little bit to do with it.
Nice.
Very
okay,
cool.
what would you say is your biggest achievement?
I don't know. I haven't done anything that cool. I think just the few opportunities where I have been in situations where I could have made a difference, I was able to.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great feeling that even when everything's on fire and somebody's dying kind of thing, to be like, hey, I've put in the time before this, so I know what to do now. Not like, oh God, I wish I'd prepared.
Yeah. So you were able to make the most of the situation and do the most good.
Yeah. And not panic too much, a little bit, but not
sure.
Nice.
Cool, man.
Nice. Okay. Here's the last one. I know how I would answer, and we've had a plethora of different answers, but I always like hearing how everybody answers on their own. So who would you consider is your greatest hero and why?
Greatest hero. Probably Shackleton. If you haven't read about his disastrous attempt to make it to the pole and the events following it, I think that's a good read for people. I think the book's Endurance, name of the ship. But quick summary: they were trying to make South Pole. Everything went wrong that could go wrong.
Right.
They should have all died, and they didn't. Not just due to his leadership, but in large part to kind of the mindset that he looked for in people that were employed underneath him, and the culture of excellence that he kind of bred. So I think that's a really good hero. Awesome. That's kind of literary. And then I'll go corny again and go back to my grandfather for real life one.
Yeah, man, for sure. Nothing wrong with
that's
family.
That's not corny.
It's a little corny.
Nah. Because it means something to you. That's not corny. No, yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, what'd you think of the 5 questions? Not too bad, right?
No, not bad at all.
You panicked over them before it even started. There was no need.
Yeah, I'm hyperventilating over here. I'm glad this is an audio thing. I'm just drenched in sweat.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. If you guys, if you want to get a class in at Independence, make sure you get a hold of Gavin. How can people get a hold of you?
Best way to do that is either come in store or email me directly at academy@iishooting.com. We'll get you figure out which class is best for you, get you booked in there, and get you taken care of. Be aware that classes are definitely filling quick on things. Probably about 2 months out right now, but we are doing our best to try and get more openings for people and get people educated.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you again. And I'll have to get a hold of you afterwards and see if we can get a medical class going. Because we'd love to do an episode on that. So.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. And stay safe and enjoy the slightly warmer weather.
Yeah, thank you, man. And if you guys have any questions, podcast@iishooting.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well @Range Minded Podcast. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay, thanks, guys. Be safe.
See ya. Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.